Good afternoon, Brian.
Good afternoon, Tom.
Brian, you may be retired, but you've been working on an idea for an economic and environmental development that could be a step change for North Africa, and you've been doing this as an Earthshot submission. Before talking about what your idea is, could you just say what Earthshot is?
Well, Earthshot is the scheme, or I think it was Richard Attenborough and Prince William inaugurated it, and they give £5 million twice a year or once a year to finance projects and allow them to be further investigated, which will benefit the environment and climate change.
And what's your big idea?
Well, I've been interested in North Africa for a long time. I remember as a young man reading stuff that an explorer called St. Barbe wrote, and he wrote about foresting the Sahara desert. But he was an interesting guy, but never really got down to planting many trees. And anyway, people have talked about it, of course, for many, many years. And historically, 2,000 years ago, it was the breadbasket for the Roman Empire.
Yes, that's the thing I find extraordinary.
So there have been an extraordinary change over those 2,000 years. And it is what it is at the moment, and that is large, vast areas of totally unused land, relative easy access to water, particularly on the coastal areas. But the blue areas indicated on the drawing here, the discovery by the British Geological Society of vast aquifers beneath the desert. So it's not without a water supply, and in fact that water supply is vast. I've talked to oil engineers who've explored the area looking for oil and said it's 99% of every drill produces water, not oil. So these aquifers are real and they're substantial. They're talking about if you attempted to empty them at a vast rate, it would take 80 years. So there is an astonishing amount of water there. There's water there, coastal water here, and the whole of the area I'm indicating now is desert. There's also a massive population, many millions of people live close to that coast and use water, but only 85% of that water is not retreated and reused. It's thrown away. It's polluting rivers and the coastal areas. So what we've got in front of us is a massive problem, looking for a solution. And we've got plenty of solar power to drive desalination plants, move water about. We've got an adequate population, if put to work, would revolutionise. It would be an agricultural revolution for North Africa.
So, if I've got this right, the different elements are that power would come from the solar panels,
yes,
used on an industrial scale.
Yes.
And I think that's starting already in Morocco and Tunisia.
It is, yes.
And Egypt. They're even exporting power to Europe.
They're currently exporting solar energy to Europe from the North African coast now.
And this power would be used to enable pumping from the aquifers and the creation and manning of desalination plants along the coast. So it's the key to, on a continental scale, subcontinental scale, accessing this huge water resource.
Yes, but it also allows recharging the aquifers from the Mediterranean Sea.
Yes, I was going to come to that because I take your point that
it's got to be sustainable, whatever it is.
Yes, and that whilst it may be 80 years, if you went hell for leather to pump it out, but at the end of that, you don't want to end up with a depleted aquifer.
Yeah.
So your system would counter that.
That's true, because I read an article recently about the introduction of solar pumps for water in Morocco. Great idea. But without recharge, you'll do what has happened in California, where you drive down the water table until you can't afford to pump the water out. Mm-hmm. So it's got to be a sustainable solution, whatever it might be.
So your idea is that with the power and the water, this gives an opportunity to significantly expand agriculture, forestry, horticulture and glasshouse produce all the way along the coastal region, and also to replicate the Great Green Wall initiative that was launched by the AU in 2007, which is to have a linear series of forests probably, holding back the desert edge.
Yes.
And create the same with these darker green areas along the northern edge of the Sahara.
But in the northern edge,
Ethiopia.
I'm envisaging more concentration on agriculture than forestry, but not agriculture alone. So it's a vision perhaps equal to our industrial revolution. It's an agricultural revolution. And Africa could become again a major exporter of food to Europe.
And the byproduct of this would also be the global benefit of locking in lots of carbon.
Yes.
From the agricultural and forestry works that we do along this northern edge of the Sahara. So it's a virtuous cycle that you're proposing here. And the outputs would be power, sustainable sources of potable water, food, forests to act as carbon sinks, and as significantly, I think, jobs, creation of wealth, the improvement of urban conditions by the introduction of potable water, and which will give them a shove towards.
Yeah, but having gone to the
sewerage.
expense, and this is what's lacking at the moment, of producing water for drinking purposes and sanitation, all of that water currently, virtually all of it, ends up in the sea or in rivers as a pollutant. What you've got to do is reuse the water. I mean, if this idea was to be implemented, for instance, perhaps by the Israelis, they would not lose a drop. It would all be retreated, reused, and not used up.
Because that's an important part of it, that it's a sustainable and virtuous cycle, and the reuse of wastewater would, of course, would be a source of water for the forestry and agricultural areas.
But there isn't an ingredient in the plan that isn't sitting there awaiting to be used. You've got water here, desalination plants here, renewing the aquifers. huge amount of land unused, brought into use, huge number of unemployed people employed.
It's, in a sense, it's a subcontinental level water management.
Well, that's what it says, big idea for Africa, and the big idea is water management.
And the effect of this, do you think it would be, well, you've said it would be the equivalent, something equivalent or similar to the effect of our industrial revolution on us, the effect socially and economically?
Well, socially and economically, a lot of people
North Africa
are water starved, they're starved of food, they're starved of employment. All of those, you tick the box and they would have something to do, good income. And if something of this kind isn't done, there are going to be water wars between the countries through here, fighting over what is there. I think the plan is suggesting there will be a huge amount of added water available, so the need to fight for it, if it's provided, doesn't exist. You'd probably not have massive population movements. Without the plan, you're going to have one huge population movement, and that is from here, probably to here.
What strikes me about the plan is it's essentially an optimistic attempt to set out very large-scale gains from large-scale planning, thinking big, really.
Well, certainly there's an example in the forest to the south here. That's costing about $900 million. And the original idea came from the African Union. So that it might be an idea that would fall on welcoming ears if we work a little harder on it and publicise it.
And all the technologies there, we're not looking for somebody to invent.
Well, we're not going to close
some new runcible spoons.
We're not going to close the sun down.
No. And desalination is something that has been tried
But it's commonplace
in the Mediterranean. Yeah. And desert agriculture is, and desert forestry is something that's been done by the Israelis.
And in the Gulf.
I understand that the Yatzir forest, set up in the 1960s, they thought it wouldn't work.
Well,
they were advised by specialists that it wouldn't work. And now there's 7,400 acres on the edge of the Negev desert with over 4 million trees growing. And on a large scale, this would lead to local climate changes.
Yes, and interestingly with the desert there, the Israelis spend more visiting it than it costs to implement annually.
It's a visionary proposal, but what I like about it is that it's there irrespective of the Earthshot competition, because it's based upon the geographic, geological, climatic and human conditions of the North African subcontinent.
Well, you've got a handful of assets there that if you put them together in a plan of this plan or a similar plan, will actually solve a lot of your problems as far as migration is concerned, employment is concerned.
And if we don't do something like this, the world's already suffering from shortages of food from the Ukraine war, and it's Africa that suffers. We've seen the effects of erratic weather conditions from climate change, what it's done to Libya, one part of Libya. without something significant to try and face climate change and try and face the problems of underemployment, underutilization of
Yes,
land,
on the correct scale.
the prognosis for North Africa is poor.
And the prognosis for Europe is poor.
Yes. It would lead to more instability, probably in both continents. Well, what's the next step in the realization of this big idea? I believe the entries for 2023 are already in, so it'd be an Earthshot entry for 2024. Do you think something like this needs the collaboration of a large UK engineering group to help?
Well, we could look in that direction, but certainly we perhaps should get more government, possible government interest in the idea.
Hence, raising it through Earthshot, which would be
raising it through Earthshot, giving it more visibility.
Well, Brian, I'm
see who will take it up.
I think it's a brilliant idea, and it's worthy of.
I think it's got a lot of traction,
pushed.
Tom.
Yeah. So I'd like to work on it.
Okay.
Brian, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
This is the map. I urge you all to have a look at it. I also urge you from your various parts of the UK and abroad, ask yourself if you could lend a hand in this. It's one of those big ideas that Brian every now and again comes up with. Loopy or loony, I can't quite remember. Loopy. It's a Brian Loopy idea, like a couple of other Loopy ideas in the past, has legs. And in one form or another, something like this is going to be done, and Brian's notion is do it on a large scale. And it's going to need people pushing the idea through contacts in various industries, professions, politics, the media. If you're interested, buttonhole either Brian or me, or write to Brian, drop him a line. But do have a look at the map, please.
Tom, thank you very much. Yes?
Yes, I wonder, sorry.
Tom.
Tom. Question for Tom. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Has any part of that project gone ahead as pilot projects to test it out?
Actually, I think, and Brian will correct me on this, certain elements of the scheme, of his big idea, have been underway for about 60 years now. The Israelis in particular, they've pioneered desalination, they've pioneered desert agriculture and desert forestry. The African Union is pushing the Great Green Wall initiative along the Sahel. They've got a long way to go, but they've launched this in 2007, and parts of it where they have desert agriculture and desert forestry are going ahead. Morocco and Tunisia are doing similar things on a small scale, and Brian's idea is to wrap it all up and push it big. It's like a Marshall Plan, you know. It needs government support, it needs international support, and right now it needs promotion.
One thing they are doing is putting together a national grid, solar power grid. So elements are going to fall into place anyway. They've got to put the 5 things together to make it work.
you can have the other microphone. Did you?
Yep. There's one here. That was first, I think.
Alex? And then Nancy?
Well done. I mean, that's typically visionary, Brian. Fantastic big idea. Could I encourage you, Tom, to add biodiversity to your list of benefits, both to hold back the loss of biodiversity in this part of the world, but also perhaps to create areas. Now, that would just depend on how you did these things, really. And the other question I have is, you mentioned the African Union. We have to remember that these are other people's countries, and some of them are at war with each other, and others are at war inside their countries. So is there any particular agency which you can think of which could lead this and could bring everybody together on it?
Not really. That's next big fish we've got for now.
I think part of the answer might be the Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN, which is a multinational company. And I think it's really important to get as many people from the African continent involved to give it that political oomph, isn't it?
But
Nancy's going to...
somebody who's got contacts with the British government to get the overseas departments of the Foreign Office interested in this, that would be smashing. And yes, we would be looking at biodiversity as integral to the... Yeah, okay, I'll mention it.
My question is very similar to the one that was just asked, and looking at that whole northern part of Africa and how many countries are involved and how unstable a lot of them are and going through their own trials and tribulations. So it just seems like a huge it would seem to me that the politics and the governance aspect of this has got to be one of the first and foremost activities to enable this to ever happen. And I think this question about an agency, yeah, that was what came to my mind too. There's got to be some overarching entity that can enable this to happen.
Can I answer that, Brian? I take the point about the political problems of that region, the strife within countries, the strife between countries. But I think overcoming those problems is done by having other issues, other ideas that build on the value of international cooperation. Let's remember, the idea of the EU, whatever you think of it, was born out of the ruins of Europe. And it's proved incredibly successful in overcoming 2 centuries of strife between West European countries.
Helen, I told you had a question.
Yes, thank you. It was you.
I think it's important to remember obviously the politics of Africa, a country that is monumentally huge and has suffered the colonial epochs of 200 years, and they're making very early starts in an idea of Pan-African, an entity with BRICS as a economic system. They're looking at a single passport, and there are all the troubles and problems of the disputes and wars, etc., etc. But the idea, I think the key thing to it is to have advocates in Africa. We can't do it from here. We can provide the seed corn, but I think if you're saying an engineering company, I think it's that thing that making the link into Africa, into countries. It's the whole of Africa could support this because of the richness of the quality of the idea, and I think that's an important thing to think about.
Totally agree with you. I only mentioned what could be done in the UK because this is where Brian's based, and I'm looking at what can be done in the next 20 months.
Can I just ask one question, Tom and Brian? Would there be any impediment to this being developed in a mosaic type fashion, so that it might just be a small implementation in one country or one part of a country that would be an advert for further implementation?
It already exists if you go to Israel. Certainly the illustration that it can be made to work is in Israel. All the technology is there. And as far as the African Union is concerned, the sub-Saharan forest is being funded by them to the tune of $900 million. So they are working together to get that project through. They're not always at war, and they can cooperate.
Brian, Tom, that was fantastic. Before we close this session, though, Linda would like to say a few words. Linda Clouston, please use that microphone.
Thank you. I've gleaned a lot from today.
Sorry, you'll have to hold it up.
Sorry.
I've
I've gleaned a lot from today that I didn't intend to say. But some of the things, Brian, one, at the beginning of the afternoon, roadways were being discussed and how they were being treed. And the first time I went on a date with Brian, we were travelling along a road and I kept saying, Brian, have you seen the trees? Have you seen the trees? Look at them, they're stunning. And he started to laugh. And I said, what are you laughing at? And he said, I did them. And I've known Brian a long time, but I didn't know him. And it's just been a beautiful surprise for me to get to know you as I do now. Listening to what has already been achieved makes me confident that Brian's future plans can be achieved. North Africa, here he comes. He said when we went to the toilet before, we've changed the world a bit. There's still an ongoing challenge to make more change, but Brian is a visionary, an encouragement and a help. And I just love what you've already achieved. And I've always thought that the English language was very rich and very colourful, able to say eloquently what we feel, with the exception, perhaps, of thank you. We say thank you to the person who opens the door for us or gives us change. It's not as common as it used to be, with plastic money, no staff at the tills, no staff at the ticket machines in the stations, and the telephone machines constantly telling us that it's much easier to go online while we wait impatiently for them to answer. And then we get well, I could go on, but I'm digressing. Please forgive me. What I really want to express is a huge thank you to all of you who have made this day possible. You've travelled far, paid for yourselves and us, showing endless patience, especially Mark. Where is he? Can't see him. Has he gone? Oh, yeah, there you are. And others, in your willingness to change plans, doing everything and some to ensure that this celebration for Brian and for me was easy. Perhaps it's fitting to use, I think it's a Geordie phrase, it's better felt than telt. What you have done has meant far more than any piece of metal that the Landscape Institute could have given him. Your appreciation and love has been indelibly written on our hearts. Brian, you never cease to amaze me, going way beyond in ways that potentially could change the world. Alongside this, you have a humility which is not only evident, but beautiful. Most people have already been transported somewhere else when they hear what their friends and family have to say about them. But we have been very blessed today to hear your life story today with you here, especially when you were in hospital yesterday. There is a further dimension I would like to mention. It is said the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. As Brian and I are in the twilight of our lives and we spend all our time together, I witness and enjoy this fruit every day from Brian. There are not many people in the world that you can say have all of those qualities, but living with Brian, he has. And I want to say to you, Brian, thank you for being my spiritual giant.
There's nothing more to say, I think.
Can I say something?
Oh, go on then.
Sorry.
Ross Anderson.
My name's Ross Anderson. I was Brian's first employee. I worked in his house in Durham to start with, and then the marketplace in the city. Everything that's been said about Brian today is true and correct. Thank you, Brian.
I think we'll draw the line there, and dinner in here at 7:30. So thank you very much, everyone, and that was a very moving speech. Thank you so much, Linda and Brian.